You are all at the point now where other people can decide whether your life is worth protecting, whether your life is worth investing in. That's where we are in America right now. This way. Like that. I'm obstructed. You don't think it would be better if I had an obstructed face? Proverbial face for radio. That's probably why our viewership is so low.
We may be small, but our hearts are large, metaphorically speaking.
Because they're viewing it. Oh dear God, what is that thing? Oh, that's just Jim's face. Anyway, I am Reverend Jim Harden. This is Proof of Life. The role of government in domestic affairs of a free people is primarily to keep bad people from doing bad things and to make it easier for good people to do good things. Scripture says in Romans 13:3 that rulers, government, are not a cause of fear for good behavior, but for evil. But one of the most destructive things bad people can do is infiltrate a rule of law government like the United States and make it easier for bad people to do bad things. In fact, make it hard, even illegal, for good people to do good things. This represents essentially the legalization of lawlessness. And the end result is not only the destruction of civilized order, but the weakening of the population. Physically, literally physically weakening the population, morally, economically. When I think about economics, you think about your mind automatically goes to like the Doge, waste, fraud, and abuse, systemic, rampant financial corruption. Morally, you think about the systemic sexual abuse of children through LGBTQ curriculum and personnel that have been hired and deployed throughout the public school system in America, which has the effect of undermining the basic unit of society, the family. You've got same-sex marriage being promoted. You've got communism being promoted in the public schools, educating the next generation of voter into political philosophies and ideologies that are absolutely antithetical to democratic republic, rule of law. You've got human trafficking. The United States is, from what I understand, the worst perpetrator of human trafficking. Tom Homan, the border czar, has been tasked by President Trump with three things, one of which is to go find and rescue the 300 to 500,000 enslaved and sexually trafficked children that crossed over the border and were placed directly into the hands of sex trafficking cartels. And this was all happening and even in some ways promoted by and paid for by the U.S. government under the Biden administration. And then, of course, beyond that, you've got exacerbating factors that are caused by the porn industry, the $100 billion porn industry that I suggest is one of the three musketeers of evil. Pornography creates an industry that creates demand for the victimization and re-victimization of sex traffic victims. One of the other of the three musketeers of evil is abortion, because the abortion industry is notorious for covering up sex crimes. You've got Planned Parenthood that has been sued by Missouri for essentially engaging in illegal activity and the transfer of minors across state lines to cover up sex crimes. You've got whistleblowers coming out of Planned Parenthood in Arizona, I believe, Maria Rodriguez, who said that Planned Parenthood was not reporting the sexual abuse and trafficking of migrant women who had become pregnant because of the fact that they were victims of sex trafficking. Physically, we've got the economics, we've got the morality, and then we've got the physicality of America. When you think about America's declining fertility rate coupled with ballooning abortion rates, and people think Roe versus Wade was overturned, so abortion must be gone. Abortion has gone up 10% nationwide. Abortion has gone up from one source in the New York Times said that abortion in New York, because of abortion tourism, which I predicted back in 2018, is up 90%. Chemical abortion has spiked. We've got the chemical abortion has flooded the market for cheap, easy to get, very dangerous chemical abortion drugs, which represent now, if the numbers can even be counted, 63% of all abortions in America, which represents nearly 1 million people a year. And you multiply that over 51 years, 50, depending on what state you're in. For New York, of course, that was 1970, so you're looking at 55 years. Millions of children have been destroyed, and those children, many of those children would have gone on to get married and have their own children. So we're looking at a genocide, and I mean it. That's a very accurate word for what we're talking about here. When people like me go on a podcast like this, or go on a news program like, I don't know, Glenn Beck or Sean Hannity, or we go out there and we establish pregnancy centers, or we go and we pray in front of abortion clinics, and we're firebombed, we're discriminated against, where there's legislation that's written weaponized against us. We've been attacked by the Attorney General, Letitia James. The Biden administration's DOJ has unconstitutionally indicted and imprisoned at least 23 pro-life people, which President Trump pardoned. These are all things that we're having to face, which means that when bad people get elected and or appoint other bad people to appointed bureaucratic positions, they make it very difficult for good people to do good things. That is, stand up and protect the weak and vulnerable society, which is the primary goal of a rule of law constitutional form of government. It's to make everybody equal on a level playing field under the law, not just give special rank to those that have money or power. The Democrats right now are the party of vice voters. They're encouraging America to binge on political, moral cotton candy. They're not interested in protecting all people equally. They're not interested in creating definitions, broadly speaking, including the protection of all people, according to the 14th Amendment under the law, including from fertilization to natural death. They don't want that because that would take away power from them. And absolute power is the ability to decide who lives and who dies. That's absolute power. That's godlike power. Nietzsche, who has been termed as the only honest modern philosopher. Okay, I'm not saying he was a good philosopher. Somebody said he was honest, and I think he probably was. That is, if you extract God from the formula of civil discourse and civil order, then all you have left is the sheer will to power. All you have left is a bunch of people who are clamoring for ascendancy and money, which gives them the ability to have more power. And then whatever they say goes. He who has the most money wins. He who has the most money rules. And that's exactly how the Democrats are behaving these last many decades. And now, because they're atheists, or at least they're practical atheists, it is a common, absolute, essential element to communism. That is, atheism. You have to extract God from society if a government is going to maintain or exact more and more control over a people group. Why? Because God tells you what your relational priorities are in life as a human being. God says, I am your first priority. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And the second priority is to love your neighbor as yourself. And there's priorities with respect to neighbors. Your second most important priority in terms of neighbors is your immediate family, your spouse, your children. There are other neighbors too, all the way down to the weak and the vulnerable, those that are beaten and left for dead on this dangerous Jericho road of culture that we find ourselves in. Whoever is the weak and the vulnerable that needs our help to live, to have their life, to live and move and have their being, Those are the people that we have to be aware of. Those are the people that Christians are uniquely aware of, because Christ is our Good Samaritan. And the lawyer asked Jesus, who's my neighbor? It's a very, quite frankly, evil question to ask. Do I really have to be neighborly to everyone? Because the reality is, when you start to engage in partiality, you're the one that gets to decide who qualifies for your favor and who doesn't. You are becoming God. You're in your own mind. You get to decide which human beings are appropriate for or qualify for protection under the law. And Jesus said, no, you can't do that. All humans are equally valuable, inherently valuable, infinitely valuable, as made in the image of God, and those for whom Christ died. Christ, of course, being God in the flesh and his blood being infinitely valuable, demonstrates the value of the human beings that he died for. That is, God assigns us a value, and it is infinite. And so, as Christians, we are to demonstrate that in our behavior, demonstrate that in our principles, demonstrate that in the way we believe and the way we speak and the way we talk and the way we act in the public square. And so when government comes along, bad people in government say, you can't act that way in the public square. You can't tell women, you can't get in their way of getting an abortion because abortion is more important than your Christian belief. That's exactly what they're saying. They're trying to make it illegal for good people to do good things. And by good things, I don't mean my personal ideas of what is good. The good thing about protecting the truth that there are only two sacred things in this world. I've said this before and I'll say it again: God and people. And that's what Christians are all about. And we're trying to protect all people. We have a liberal definition of what it means to be a person. It's everybody, right? The liberal, Democrat, progressives have a very narrow definition of what it means to be a person. If you think that you have value, if I think you have value, if you're not what a medical professional might call a vegetable, if you're elderly or depressed or disabled, or you've got some sort of genetic abnormality, or maybe you're not even born yet, you're still in the womb, you're all less than human. That's the slippery slope. You are all at the point now where other people can decide whether your life is worth protecting, whether your life is worth investing in. That's where we are in America right now. That is the knife's edge of civilized order. We are being led in many respects by barbarians. And by the way, the definition of a barbarian is somebody who simply does not have virtue. They have no concept for behaving in virtuous ways. They just don't know up from down, right from wrong. They're just pulling it out of their back pocket. Whatever they feel like doing today, whatever they feel like gives them the most, pleasure, power, whatever fits their appetite. Now's the time for Congress to step in and start making some things permanent, because the president can only do so much. And we'll talk more about that in just a minute. I'm Reverend Jim Harden. This is Proof of Life. If you're one of those that are watching online and you like this hat that I've talked about, Make America Moral Again, and you actually believe that for America to become a moral leader globally, you need to make her moral again, and you think that women need to have an ethical alternative to abortion, go to compasscarecommunity.com/Harden, and you'll find a link there that'll take you to the ability to get a hat just like this. It's a nice hat. It looks like the Trump MAGA hat, same kind of block lettering. It's got an American flag on one side. It's got Compass Care on the other. Good hat, solid quality. We need to lead by example. And I think that's what Compass Care is doing. The medical team at Compass Care is helping women have their babies every single day who are seriously considering abortion. We actually interact with women who have been trafficked, and we're trying to help our nurses identify the signs of sex trafficking so we can get them out and save their lives and their babies' lives too. So make America moral again.
June commemorates the anniversary of Dobbs versus Jackson, the overturning of the unconstitutional 1973 judicial legislation fabricating a right to abortion. The unprecedented, illegal leak of that ruling 1 month prior sparked pro-abortion Antifa domestic terror against 500 pro-life entities, including the brutal firebombing of Compass Care's pro-life medical office in Buffalo, injuring 2 firefighters. The criminals are still at large, but FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino announced opening investigations into the Supreme Court's security breach. U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi launched the Weaponization Working Group, looking into corruption within the DOJ. Bondi's Assistant U.S. Attorney General, Harmeet Dillon, promised prosecutions of pro-abortion terrorists. President Trump even signed an executive order establishing the task force to eradicate anti-Christian bias in government. Is justice dawning? Real Abortion News is sponsored by Compass Care.
We've got, in America, rogue judges undermining the rule of law, while a cadre of Trump judicial and executive appointees are waiting in the wings for Senate approval. We've got, and I'm not kidding you, we've got a Department of Defense with Dan Driscoll admitting to training Army specialists that all Christian pro-life groups are terrorists. All we get is a toothless apology. We've got evidence of a Biden mafia colluding with the DOJ and FBI, labeling as domestic terror threats not only pro-life Christians, but also concerned parents speaking out about sexually abusive transgender curriculum at public schools. And whatever you might think of a House vote to release Epstein data, the grand jury files were already released last year after a lawsuit by the West Palm Post. Yet there's still no one seems to be asking which abortionist provided the abortionists for the sex crime syndicate here in New York and elsewhere, so that the DOJ can start processing a RICO case against them. The glove that covers the criminal hand of sex trafficking is the abortion industry. That's why it's a good thing that Planned Parenthood was defunded. They have committed not only Medicaid fraud, and they're asking for $800 million in Medicaid money, but this demonstrated Medicaid fraud, but they have had multiple lawsuits for failing to report sex crimes and sexual abuse of minors. We've got the Trump administration and President Trump himself doing a lot. He's done a lot to unravel the Biden administration's war on conservative Christian pro-life people, parents, and child victims of sex trafficking. I talked about that in the last segment. After all, not only have parents and pro-life groups been labeled domestic terrorists by the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Defense, but the Department of Justice and FBI both sparked investigations, indicted and imprisoned many peaceful pro-lifers, thankfully most of which were pardoned by President Trump when he came into office. But those same groups and same people at the same time were being physically attacked and threatened with their lives by actual domestic terrorists known as Jane's Revenge, which is a front group for Antifa. What I'm getting at here is all departments under the purview of the executive branch are run as the president sees fit, for good or for ill. And we saw mostly for ill during the Biden administration. But the reality is that by definition, the president's actions are largely temporary if he's acting only as the executive. They can be easily undone by the next Marxist Democrat successor. What is more permanent are the actions of the legislative branch. And that's where we have all of our next steps. And here's the problem, though. You need the House and the Senate, right? And the House of Representatives is a very narrow kind of Republican majority. And in the midterm elections, traditionally, the trend has been that the kind of opposition party gains more seats. And they only need to gain a couple of seats. And if there's reapportionment that they're threatening in New York and California, they might pick up a couple more. And given the fact that primary season starts and that the House of Representatives have 2-year terms and they're basically always campaigning, but given the fact that the primary season starts and the Republicans are going to have to work extra hard to keep the seats they have, given this trend, we're looking at 9 months max for the legislature to get anything done. 9 months. Is now the time to go on recess? Look, Speaker Johnson, I like Speaker Johnson. And the fact that he let the House go on early recess, he let the House go early for summer recess, ostensibly because he didn't want to have to do a vote for Epstein or whatever, is a bit, I don't know, ridiculous. He has 9 months, maybe he doesn't have very much time left, likely, until he's no longer the Speaker of the House. He's got a legacy that he needs to ensure. He needs to lead the House of Representatives, and Senator Thune, the majority leader, needs to lead the Senate into a moment in time where we can shore up the rule of law for generations to come, because that has been attacked. So they have an opportunity to sabotage the Marxist, anti-Christian, anti-capitalist machine. They do. And it's a very short window. What needs to be done? I've got some ideas. I've got 6 ideas. I've got more than that. But there's 6 things that I think that they can do that would actually protect religious liberty, freedom of speech, and the ability for good people to do good things, and make it more difficult for bad people to do bad things for at least a couple generations to come. And it's going to be very difficult for Marxists to overturn these kinds of things if it were passed through legislation. And I think, number one, we got to begin at the foundation with a Personhood Clarification Act. And I know there's great people out there that understand the Constitution better than I do, insofar as, hey, look, the Constitution already recognizes the personhood of all people, including preborn boys and girls, because of the nature of when it was written and the understanding of the founders that children in the womb ought to be protected. Okay, great, I get that. But most people don't understand that. And so all we need to do is clarify to all the states like New York, who are creating Proposition 1 and trying to enshrine abortion as a fundamental human right and all that kind of garbage. We need to clarify to them from a federal level that personhood, the definition of a person, extends to all people from the moment of fertilization to natural death. They are equally protected under the law. You can't go around trafficking in embryos in the Wild West, medical Wild West of IVF clinics. You can't go around killing preborn boys and girls just because you think it's a woman's right. You can't go around offing elderly people just because you think they're vegetables and they're just a drain on the Medicaid system. You can't do that anymore, okay? That would be very helpful for some of these rogue justices in the judiciary. It would be very helpful for some of these progressive communist states like California. It'd be very helpful for people like Rob Bonta and Letitia James, the attorney generals, who are illegally abusing their positions to violate the constitutional rights of those that seek to protect the weak and vulnerable among us. Another thing I think that can be done to shore up global civil liberty and refortify America as a global moral leader and protect Americans from other Americans is creating a Human Dignity and Purpose of Medicine Act. A Human Dignity and Purpose of Medicine Act. And this would essentially declare that human dignity is derived from God, not government. Who, that is with a capital W, makes each person inherently valuable, which I talked about this earlier. Inherently valuable because we're made in God's image, and infinitely valuable by virtue of the shed blood of Christ. Therefore, medicine must never be used to mutilate, kill, or hasten the demise of a human through egregious breaches in medical ethics, such as experimental vaccines, transgender hormone therapies or surgery, euthanasia, physician-assisted suicide, the unregulated production and sale of human embryos via IVF, the destruction of preborn boys and girls for abortion, and the intentional hastening of the demise of those that have been injured critically, and who organ harvesting companies are seeking their organs, like, I don't know, vampires. It is inhumane. A third thing I think that can be done, they can move on to defining traditional marriage as a vital interest to the future of America. Why? Because the next generation of stable citizen is reared there and you need to define a traditional marriage as between one man, biological, and one woman, biological, who have children. And they raise these children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. That is sacrosanct. And you could add to that the sacrosanct nature of parental rights. These children were not given to the government. They were given by God to these parents to raise. And it's incumbent upon the government to encourage the church to teach parents what it means to be human, so that the parents in turn can teach the children what it means to be human, male and female, made in the image of God. Another thing, I think, number 4, that can be done to refortify the foundation of global civil liberty is to dismantle the Department of Education.
No! No! No!
The Department of Education has been indoctrinating our children into atheistic and communistic ideology, exacerbating the generational moral rot with hypersexualized personnel and curriculum. The sexual abuse that is systematized into the curriculum and borne out through many of the personnel is reprehensible. And the Department of Education just simply needs to be shut down. And we need to democratize education back into the hands of parents and give them school choice, including, and perhaps most importantly, homeschool choice. I think 5th, you could further pass a bill that automatically withholds federal funding to liberal states like New York or any other state that actively oppresses, defames, attacks, refuses to protect when attacked, or otherwise discriminate against or encourage others to discriminate against Christians or churches as they peacefully express their beliefs in the public square. Just stop it. Just stop giving them money. You want to attack pro-life pregnancy centers and force them to not be able to hire according to their biblical views around abortion and human life, then you don't get federal money. It's just as simple as that. And the legislature, the Congress, could take great strides in making America a global moral leader again by cleaning up the internet, quite frankly. And with that, the minds of Americans, while protecting women and children from being victimized by the $100 billion porn industry by passing the Obscenity Definition Act, Internet Obscenity Definition Act. That would go a long way in making America moral again. So these other initiatives would be several great steps forward and pave the way for a more humane America to stave off what I would call the elected Nietzscheans from their ravenous will to absolute godlike power. They want to reinvent humanity in their own image, and that's just wrong. So I think the 119th Congress is an opportunity of biblical proportions over the next 9 months. There's a verse in the Bible in Isaiah chapter 58 says, you can be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of the streets in which to dwell. This would be a great legacy for Speaker Johnson and Majority Leader Thune to leave behind them, but they have a very short window. They've got 9 months to step into the fray. And I'll leave you with this. Benjamin Franklin, if you're thinking about whether or not to take a break, a summer recess, vacation, whatever, knowing full you've got the sword of Damocles hanging over the rule of law in America, and America being the last bastion of freedom in the world today, I think Congress might do well to heed the warning against laziness from one of America's founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin. And he said, there will be sleeping enough in the grave. Call off the August recess. Make it easier for good people to do good things again. I'm Reverend Jim Harden. This is Proof of Life.